Okay, well, this is Joe Lewis, and we're here on Bonehead Weekly with Glenn Cochrane from Fake Shemp. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm okay. Why do people fucking ask that asinine question?
Joe, I don't give a shit.
You know what I mean, though. I'm sure you've interviewed Rob Zombie. I mean, why do people? I don't ask it on panels when I do them at cons. I don't open up with "How you doing today?" because we just spent 5 minutes behind closed doors talking about the shit they do and don't want to talk about. So
it's like when you listen to callback radio and every single caller is like, "How you going? How are you?" Like,
Okay.
we know we've been listening for the last 2 hours.
Here, then let me restart, and maybe Joe, you can edit this out. Hey, welcome to Bonehead. Hey, Glenn, are you belly button lint free today?
I haven't checked.
Go ahead. We'll wait.
what the hell was that?
Don't ask questions.
To go ahead and get started about one thing, and I know Chad wants to ask one question.
We've got to have a short discussion with Glenn, all three of us.
But really quick, I want to say, it's like you and I are developing a bromance, and this is actually the first time we've talked back and forth that hasn't been typing.
I know.
God bless you being a chubby chaser, my friend. All right. Now, Chad, go ahead and get started.
All right. So gentlemen, we have to talk to Glenn about a couple of things.
Yeah.
So I've been listening to some of his podcasts, and I've learned some startling information about Glenn.
Uh-oh.
First, he really likes Blues Brothers 2000.
I will defend the soundtrack. I will defend the soundtrack. The soundtrack to Blues Brothers 2000.
Hang on. You can't just say that without context.
Give us the context, my friend.
I'm a sucker for bad sequels, man.
He is. Because Joe, another one of his movies that he really likes is Exorcist 2.
What? Okay, The Exorcist 3, I will defend to the day I die. I always say, because that's the direct sequel. It's based on the book Legion by William Peter Blatty. William Peter Blatty wrote it and directed it. It's got that great performance by Brad Dourif. Wonderful movie that people, I think, have forgotten about. I saw it in the theater as a kid, so that's how fucked up I am. But Exorcist 2?
Mm-hmm.
I want to chime in here real quick and say, Joe, as the guy that defends Grease 2, should you be living in that glass house throwing those stones?
No.
That's good too. That is good too.
Never mind. I tried to help. I tried.
Hold on. But no, there's a flaw in his logic about how he's a sucker for sequels. Because he does not care for The Dark Knight.
But I don't care for superheroes.
Oh, I didn't get that part. Okay.
Oh, I can get that, actually. I understand that. I love some of the
Dark Knight it's a disjointed movie. It's two stories they've melded together and not pulled off very well. They killed Two-Face off before he even really becomes Two-Face.
Honestly, that was my biggest problem with that movie, was the fact that Two-Face is one of my favorite villains of all time. And they're building up, and then he's in the movie for a grand total of, 10 minutes?
Mm.
So, that killed me.
In the third film.
So, go ahead.
There's one more. There's one more we got to talk about. James, you might want to hold on to your heartstrings for this one.
Here we go.
Poor Glenn has never heard of Manos Hands of Fate.
Oh, I hadn't either till James Thomas introduced me.
The Hands of Fate. They're Manos, the Hands of Fate.
So Glenn, a background story is neither Joe nor I knew about Manos Hands of Fate until in our early 20s when we met this schlub. And he introduced us to us, and we've never been the same. So
Did you have to watch it with him in his apartment, though, Chad?
No, I watched it alone because you all wouldn't invite me to
I remember. This is no shit. This is seriously. We were working together at another university. No shit. He invited me over to show it to me, and this was the menu he served me. I'm not making this up. Some sort of boiled baked fish. I can't remember.
It was baked.
And cheese dip. He's famous for his cheese dip. Two things never went together less.
Did you eat it?
Well, yeah, I'm a big fat
Then shut your pie hole.
Now, since you found out about this movie in your podcast, have you actually taken the time to go back and just – no, I don't blame you.
not missing anything.
You are making a wise decision.
Man, you've been paying attention, dude. You've been paying attention.
It's got a sequel now. Maybe you'd like the sequel because it does have a sequel that just came out, I think, last year now. It was
What was that called?
Crowdfunded. I think it's Torgo's Revenge is the sequel. But yeah, no, Manos.
It's called The Feat of Destiny.
No, Manos is, I will say is, and I've talked about that film so much. A good friend of mine who does listen to the show sent me they did a restoration. They somehow managed to dig up the original film, and they did a Blu-ray transfer of it. And that movie never needed a Blu-ray transfer. It's not in focus to begin with.
No,
like I just remember Joe sitting in my apartment screaming, "They can't even get it in focus." But it is, I defend, the best movie ever made by a fertilizer salesman. So I just got that going.
But Chad, I'm a little bit disappointed, mate, because you didn't mention my passionate love for Caddyshack 2.
Okay. I didn't mention that. I was going to rip on you a little bit about your love of Spice World, but we'll talk about Caddyshack 2 because me and Joe both listen by Caddyshack 2.
You know why? Because Chad and Joe like Caddyshack 2 as well.
Yes.
Love the soundtrack. He and I will listen to that song all the time.
I'm
going all the way.
I love it.
Me too. I don't know why people rip on it other than, Dan Aykroyd's performance in that is a little less to be desired. But it's a solid.
One with the fruit.
I wonder how they got him, because that came out in the summer of '88, and I saw this in Florida with my mother visiting my grandmother at Cocoa Beach, and we would go to the mall because it was June or July in Florida. It was hot as hell, and I got to see movies because that was what I was. I was a little geek. And we saw Caddyshack 2, and I've thought to myself over the years, how did they get Dan Aykroyd at that time? I mean, he did Dragnet, Ghostbusters 2 was about to come out.
Well, I'll tell you, he was a poor man's Bill Murray.
Yeah, I get that.
And it would have been a favor to Harold Ramis.
I guess, but Harold Ramis didn't direct it. He's one of the writers. But
he wrote it, but he felt obligated to write it.
It's directed by, what's his face that started out with Joe Dante. I can't think of his name. Alan Arkush. Because they did Hollywood
Squares.
With Paul Lynde.
They all started out with Roger Corman. Sorry.
Yeah.
Lynn, this is the good thing about him. It's not everyone that we can have on the show that's going to know what the hell we're talking about right now. So I'm actually kind of happy.
Which means that everyone watching won't know what the hell we're talking about.
Fuck them.
I went on a thesis about Ghoulies 2 and how amazing Ghoulies 2 is, so.
Ghoulies 2 is a superior film to Ghoulies.
But Ghoulies is the reason I love horror so much. Ghoulies and A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I watched back to back when I was 5 years old. And the tagline on the poster for Ghoulies is "They'll get you in the end."
Yeah.
Because of the toilet.
Literally. I wouldn't watch it to the end because I was terrified they would actually get me. But it was that feeling of terror that it's exhilarating.
A funny story.
I blame Charles Band for my love of horror.
Every time we get somebody, if you've listened to any of our shows, anyone who has ever had anything to do with Full Moon or Empire, anybody who's ever had any affiliation with Charlie Band, we always say, we've never met him. He won't do the show. Tell us your best Charles Band story, your best Charlie Band. And by God, every one of them have a distinct story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it'd have to be like my favorite story is probably, I heard the one you guys talked about the other week with, who was the comic guy you had on?
Peter David. Oh, Peter David. Peter David did not want to leave our house. I mean, it took us forever, 6 months, 5 months to finally book him. And then he did over 3. And you can't throw, I wasn't going to add it. I wasn't going to throw it away. I was like, he's a comic book legend. He's a writing legend. Yeah. We'll just throw it all in there. He wanted to go on.
And he told us to hook up with him again. So we need to.
Yeah, we didn't even get really to the comics. He wanted to.
I love the stories of Charles Band a couple of years ago when the whole VHS resurgence came about, where he said he found his old VHS of the old films from the 80s and he blew the dust off them and he's going to resell them. And then someone purchased one and saw the fine print and it said printed in 2018. But I do a bit of work with do you guys know Albert Pune?
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And you've done a lot of stuff on your through Fake Shemp. I was looking through all the.
I've worked with him in the past, and I run his website, and he's one of the only people that has positive things to say about Charles Band.
Yeah, I've actually tried to contact him. He won't respond back to my messages because I would love to have a conversation with him.
Yeah, we'd love to have him on the show.
He's really sick.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
He's really ill, but I can pass that along.
Yeah, if he wants to do it.
It's whether he's got stamina.
Yeah. Well, now now we have someone else. Courtney Joyner wrote a couple of movies and directed a movie for him, and he has positive things to say about him too. His point was, I would have never got the chance to direct without him, right, guys? I mean,
yeah.
And he didn't have anything negative to say. He's like, no, he paid me. There wasn't an issue.
I mean, the parameters that Charles Band works in are no different to what Lloyd Kaufman works in, or even Corman. I guess he's just got more of a reputation because he's a bit more, I don't know, transparent.
I mean, I love the stories of him ripping off Paramount to do and not putting it in the budget.
But man, I love the Full Moon catalog.
I want to do a quick shout out because I'm with you, Glenn. I grew up on Full Moon. Like Joe rips on me a little bit about I love Full Moon. And for our listeners, download the Tubi app because Tubi app has a Full Moon channel and there's several Full Moon movies streaming for free. And I highly recommend, at least just for giggles, checking out Creeps, aka Deformed Monsters.
Well,
and Oblivion 1 and 2.
Oblivion, and don't forget Spooky Town.
I haven't seen Spooky Town.
The Jeff Burr film.
Yeah, it's on my list. And we've talked to Jeff Burr.
We did a 2-parter with Jeff Burr.
How good is he?
He's great.
He was fantastic. He lives in southern Georgia now. His mother got sick, and he's basically taking care of her, but he wants to get back in the movies. I think he's another one of those guys, and we've talked to several of them, who just didn't get their shot because of the luck of the draw.
Well, can you tell him the first step to coming back is to put a profile picture on your Facebook page?
Or answer. So I'd been trying to get him for 2 or 3 years, and I met him several years. If you listen to the episode, it's all true. I'd met him several years ago. And finally, our friend Mick Strawn, who's, by the way, this is another funny story. I can't believe you're not Scarefest. You left Scarefest for us tonight. I appreciate it. And I want to get into that in a little bit, but our dear friend Mick Strawn, who's hooked us up with so many people, is actually who made that happen. Out of the blue, right? He's like, hey, you ever want to talk to Jeff Burr? I was like, yeah, I've been trying to get a hold of him for years.
Yeah.
Or at least a couple of years.
Well, Jeff Burr plays a fairly integral part of the history of Fake Shemp because he was one of the first people I interviewed. And he just said to me, he goes, you're in Melbourne. He goes, do you know Justine? I'm like, well, there's probably 1,000 Justines in Melbourne. And he goes, Justine Ryan. I'm like, no. So he introduced me to this chick that's down here, and she became like one of the Fake Shemp reporters. And then we brought on someone else, and it all because of this guy, Jeff Burr. Like, he sort of pulled my team together in the early days.
That's awesome.
Wow.
How did you meet him?
I just approached him on Facebook for, I've got this new website. It was about 8 years ago. Would love to talk to you. You're one of my cinematic heroes, Pumpkinhead 2. Can't go wrong, Night of the Scarecrow. And he was on board, and he's like, absolutely. And then just randomly plucked all these names out. There's a movie group down here in Melbourne called the Cinemaniacs, and he loves them. So he just sort of steered me in the right direction, and I ended up with a team.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is very cliche, but it is kind of a small world, especially now with social media. We're so connected, and it's great because 15 years ago, this wouldn't be happening right now. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
That's it. And when it's a niche sort of area that we revolve in, it's, all the smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. So, James, did you have something before I'm started out?
No, I mean, I can throw something out if you want.
No, just shut the hell up. So,
okay.
Glenn.
Wait, go ahead.
I've got the dynamic peg. James, you're the one that's going to throw me under the bus, right?
No, actually, my question was, I'm gonna put you on the spot. I'm gonna make you answer a question for all of Australia. I apologize to have to do this, but what did your country do that made it the only country not represented in Star Trek? There's no Australian bridge officer ever. What did Australia do?
I'm trying to think about that.
Is there a Croatian one?
Yeah, they're actually, matter of fact,
Why did I ask? I should have kept my mouth shut.
I'm pretty sure there is an Aussie in there somewhere.
Because I know they've had Australian actors, but I think they've had them play people supposedly from England. So I was just sitting there and I was like, what question can I ask that has nothing to do with anything? And I was like, wait a second, let me go through my Star Trek geekiness. And it's always like, oh, England, France, we've got German, we've got Russia, but I was like, there's never been anybody that was like, well, I'm originally from Australia. So
James.
It's because we were all over in the Star Wars universe.
Okay, fair enough. You got me.
Boy, that was a big middle finger.
And James, you know the country's Germany, not German.
No. Look it up. It's German now.
Deutschland.
Deutschland. Okay. I have so many questions.
Be careful when you do that because you might get canceled.
True. Holy cow. Actually, if they go through the whole catalog, I'm pretty sure we've said shit that's just flown that, and it will probably come back on me. Thank God no one's listening or watching. Now, here's I had like 5 questions, but the one I cannot, and it just keeps sticking in my head, and I don't mean to harp on a specific group, is how the hell did you end up working with Scarefest? I don't know the story.
Well, you know Billy Crank, right?
Yeah.
So I've been friends with Billy Crank for about 7 or 8 years.
How did you meet Billy Crank?
Well, because of my absolute love for Ernest P. Worrell. So,
really?
Me and Glenn have so much in common.
Those first 4 Ernest films, like my office used to be lined with those posters. And back in the day when the whole Son of Ernest thing was a thing and was going to happen, I wanted to get in touch with whoever it was playing him. So I reached out and we just became friends immediately because he recognized that I had stuff to offer, writing some comedy and editing videos and that kind of stuff. So we've been doing that ever since. And then obviously he's always at Scarefest in character. So that drew my attention to it. Then one year when he was at Scarefest, at the after party, he sent me a video on Facebook where he met another Australian. Her name's Beth Darlington. She comes over every year.
I know who Beth. I know Beth. We've met vaguely. I mean,
Beth and I are best friends. So Billy introduced me to her, and then she got into Scarefest ear and said, "Hey, this guy that lives down here with me, has some media stuff to offer," and they pretty much invited me to do some content for Scarefest TV.
It's fantastic, and I've watched some of the videos that you and Billy have done, and I really enjoy your work, but I just didn't know. So Beth is she into the paranormal? Is that the reason why she started going? Because that's one of the interesting things about Scarefest, is that it's one of the only horror and paranormal.
She runs a group called Access Paranormal, and it's a bit of like, for lack of a better word, it's a bit of an educational tool for people wanting to get into it. And it's what I love about what she does is she sort of washes out all the bullshit. So she's all about, let's look at this scientifically first and debunk all of the crap. So when there's no explanation left, that's what we look at. And she's now based in London, but when she was in Australia, her and I would catch up all the time and do some ghost tours. And I like doing it with her because the ghost tours, when she hosts them, are all about, that was just literally a bump in the night. That was nothing, whereas you've got everyone else with these little gadgets buzzing and shit, and it's I hate that stuff. So anyway, long story short, she got me into the whole Scarefest thing by sort of making my name known to Brandon and Nicole and Wes, and
that's awesome.
So quick question. Okay.
Yeah.
Since you're an Ernest fan like myself, pick Ernest Goes to Camp or Ernest Saves Christmas?
Camp.
Yeah! Thank you!
Ernest Saves Christmas was made in Florida, and that doesn't make sense to me.
Joe, James.
Well, it was made in Florida at the time when Disney was building its studio down there with MG, which was originally called MGM. Oh my God, I could go into the history of this shit. I'm sorry, you probably already know it, but it's Christmas.
Do you see this?
Yeah, I know, but Christmas has the best line ever. Of course, it's not said by Ernest. It's said by the little old lady, and it's just a quick cut. Did you ever find your sack?
No. The best Ernest line ever. Once again, I do it for one of our fans every year on his birthday. Is of course from Ernest Scared Stupid. Botswana doesn't have any trees. I am a Botswanian lumberjack, and I ain't never had a job.
Ernest Rise Again's better.
You shut your mouth. Ernest Rise Again does not get mentioned on this podcast.
Rise Again is a very undervalued film.
Thank you.
I'm actually really good friends with Jim Varney's niece, Andrea Lloyd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I did for a time moderate or create an official Jim Varney website, but it kind of didn't go anywhere.
His nephew, I believe, wrote the book "The Importance of Being Earnest," which I have on the shelf over here. So
yeah, he's good value, and so Andrea's his sister, and they've got all kinds of awesome sort of photos and stuff that we're going to upload into this website that's never been shown before. But I guess everyone's just too busy, and it's hard to get everyone together to make it work. Until now.
So we've been really lucky the last couple of months. The one good thing about COVID-19 is that people have had time on their hands and have said yes that have said no for a very long time. Now we're starting to run out of some of those yeses and hopefully getting more, but that's been one of the good things. I got to do a little history. So tell me something about yourself. You said Ghoulies and Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 were the two movies that got you into horror. What got you into movies? Were it those two?
No, kind of. I mean, I've been raised on movies, so my parents would watch films a lot, and they wouldn't shelter me from any of them. So, I was exposed to the good stuff from a very early age, and I guess my parents were just really good at contextualizing with me. If they noticed that something would affect me or scare me, then they'd talk to me about it and tell me how movies are made. And that, for example, the original Lethal Weapon, there's a scene where when the guys get stuck in the pool plastic in the pool, and they're getting that terrified me as a kid, that thought of being stuck in all that plastic. And my parents paused the VHS and just sort of told me that, that's a stunt person, they can breathe, and as soon as the camera cuts, they're out of there. And once I understood as a very young kid what that was all about, it was like there was nothing off limits. It was like, just movies appealed to me because it was so magical and you could do that kind of stuff that you can't do in real life.
Can you tell me more about being raised by good parents?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's way better than what my dad did, where he would just not even pause it and go, hey, some of that's fake.
Yeah, my mom introduced me to Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, when I was 4. And then didn't bother to tell me. I'm sitting there going, oh, it's all fake, son.
Yeah, I got The Exorcist at 11 when Mom and Dad were splitting up, and I think she just thought it's time for him to watch what the real world's like. I don't know. I'm trying to do that with my son, too. There's certain things, and it's great that you said that because he was asking about something. He's not even 3. He'll be 3 in a few weeks, and he loves Ghostbusters. But he was asking, I can't remember and I was like, son, it's fake. It's fake. This is special effects. In fact, we were watching the new, which I highly recommend, not to get off point. I don't know if you guys watched the new making of Ghostbusters on Cleaning Up the Town. It's on Crackle. It's free. Go out and watch it. I like it much better than the one that IGN or whoever did just a few months ago, because this one is almost all production people. It has a few of the actors in it, but it's mainly production folks, and I highly recommend it for the other 3. Especially the other two boneheads who love Ghostbusters. So it didn't screw you up too bad. I need to tell my wife that then.
Well, I think the best thing about the 80s is there's so many good gateway films for kids to get into horror. There's a lot of family-friendly horror, which they don't do a lot of anymore.
No.
These days we bubble wrap and we cotton wool our kids, but, I think there's a lot more psychological benefit to exposing them to it, just for the whole, learning to be resilient and understanding what fear is and the importance of being scared in certain situations.
Yeah. And what is and what isn't scary. So let's talk a little bit about you. Did you go to film school, right?
Went to 2. Went to the Vancouver Film School in Canada because I lived over there for a while. And then came back here to RMIT and studied, which is the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, studied film and television production, and I was 1 year below James Wan and Lee Winnell in the same course.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So you guys were buddies, right? And you hung onto their coattails, and it's just all history from that. It's it's nothing but success.
And You know who else was in that course was have you heard of Scott Ryan? He's there's a show over there called Mr. In Between.
No, I'm not familiar with it. I'll have to check it out.
James is.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I don't get out much, but
Well, the guy that created that was in our course as well, and he made a film down here called The Magician, which was a mockumentary about a hitman, and there's one of the networks over in America sort of caught wind of it and asked him to produce it for America, and that's what Mr. In Between is. But anyway, he came from the same course as James Wan and Lee Winnell as well.
It's so you graduated from film school. Tell me a little bit more about your history. What did you try to work in the industry for a while? What happened?
I made a grave error of judgment when it came to graduating because I had been working in the video industry, like, working video stores. And at that point in time, things were still going gangbusters. Everything, it was a great industry to be in. And the video store I was working in went up for sale. So with my family, I bought into it and ended up owning a video store for a good 13 to 14 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, until the fucking industry died. And,
yeah,
all of those years spent, I could have been pursuing the actual film career.
Well, there's something to be said about that, but there's also something to be said of 13 or 14 years of meeting those folks and giving out those movies and watching the smiles. I'm sorry. I know.
I was about to say. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
No, it sounds fun to me. I wish I'd got that opportunity.
It's interesting.
You go.
I was just going to say it's really interesting because I think we've talked about this before. We missed the video store because so many movies that I discovered was because I went into a movie theater or a movie rental place and I said, and somebody would stop me. What are you looking for? I don't know. I just want something to watch. What do you like? And I would say something, and I got introduced to so many films that I enjoyed. Not all of them, not all recommendations work out. And that's gone now. I've got to rely on an algorithm on Netflix or whatever. Yeah. And I find it interesting because one of my students at the university I work at, her and her husband own the last video rental store in like an 8-county radius. And it's really funny because they said, it used to be you couldn't compete against Blockbuster. Now we are the only option and people drive in from different counties. And I was like, it's weird to see how that happens, but I do miss that, as Joe was saying, that, hey, try this. I mean, so many movies I got exposed to.
Well, that's one thing we do every week on our podcast is we try to still keep on top of what physical releases are coming out. Because, I mean, even though you can't go and rent anymore, just to have a product in your hand, to be able to sort of read the back, that's part of the experience, and that kids of today don't have. And they don't even comprehend how that's important. And I understand that too, but to us, that's the appeal, having good artwork, which, the suppliers need to start improving their artwork because they've gotten so bland and generic.
Yeah. Oh, it's awful.
Yeah, but anyway, I do miss those days. One of the things that came out of it was I actually wrote a blog called Tales from a Clerk, which is all about the dickhead customers that we used to have.
Uh-huh.
And I've pulled that offline because I got approached by someone to publish it into like a coffee table book.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that one. I've got 2 books I'm writing, and that's one of them. And there's some amazing stories that come out. I'll give you one if you want.
Please, please. This is all about you.
Well, there's a good story. I worked in because at the time I worked in a chain before I purchased. I worked in a chain that had about 7 outlets within our area. And one was a mega store. So it was like a factory warehouse full of video rentals. And there were about 15 staff working at the time. And I was standing next to an older woman that was working behind the counter with me. And a man approached her at the desk. And he said, my videos are stuck in the return chute. And she said, well, which return chute? He's like, the one here at the desk, because underneath the desk was a slot that you put And so she reached down to get them, but his dick was in the return chute. And so she grabbed that instead and yanked it through. Hilarious.
What was his end game? I mean, what did he think was going to happen?
He wanted that to happen.
Oh, well, I guess he got what he wanted then. What a great customer service you provided.
There are so many stories like it. Actually, I'll give you one more, and then that's it, because I want to publish this thing. But we used to have a guy, or it was a guy. So we had a pest in our store, and he would take Polaroid photos of his dick and hide them inside the cases, so that you could be scanning out movies to families or whatever, and you might open like Annie. Boom, there's a Polaroid of this guy's dick inside. But the beautiful thing about this was he took these photos inside the store because you could see from the background that he's in the store, but we could never actually find who he was because he was clever about it. So we just knew what his dick looked like and nothing else. And it went on for about 6 months, and we had to really be careful not to let customers see as we scanned, because any one of those tapes could be like a dick pic.
And you never found out who he was?
No.
He was
because we had cameras, and he would take these photos in a certain part of the store where the camera couldn't see, and yet we would always try to watch that area, and no. He's clever.
What's funny about here is the missing story that there's a gentleman out there right now who is in tears that he can't do that anymore. Nobody thought about how the end of video would affect that gentleman. He has lost his only passion, and he is alone. Why is it? Won't somebody think of the children?
Well, so how did you start Fake Shemp?
Well,
I know where the name comes from.
Of course you do.
Yes.
I had a blog. No, not a blog. I had a group on Facebook just because it was Glenn's movie group or something like that, and had a friend visiting from overseas that just said to me one day out of the blue, "You should turn that into a website." And it was easy as that. The next day, I paid for a domain and had it set up. And I originally called it, this is the worst, I called it Dashflix. Don't ask me why. I think it was because my reviews in the early days were very short paragraph reviews, layman stuff. So I thought, quick, Dash, Flicks, everyone loves Netflix. But then I realized Netflix owned the name Dashflix as well. So
Wait, what?
Fake Shemp came to me, yeah. Fake Shemp just came to me out of the blue. Just like, I love Sam Raimi, I'll call it Fake Shemp. No one got it.
Is that where that comes from? I thought it was John. I'm joking. Nobody's going to get that joke. Yeah. Well, I mean, and so you've had a lot of luck. Let me ask you a question. You have had some big stars. How did you get Rob Zombie? How did you get some of these folks? How are you able to get them?
Well, I'm very lucky. Some of them, like, I approach myself, but the big ones, like your Michael Mann and your Rob Zombie,
I've got to listen to Michael Mann because I'm a huge fan. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but Michael Mann is the second most difficult person I've ever interviewed. But
we'll get to that in a minute because we get these questions all the time.
Okay. But I write for Australia's largest print publication called Stack Magazine, and they arrange a lot of these interviews for me for print. And I said in the early days, I said, well, I'm going to record these. Can I use the recordings on my podcast? Which is great because what goes to print is only a real fraction of the greater interview. So they print part of it, and then the rest of it just gets dumped onto my podcast, and which I love because I like to delve into stuff that's unrelated to the article. And in fact, last night I recorded my podcast and I was talking about Mary Harron, who did American Psycho.
Yep.
Yeah.
I recorded a really good interview with her. Yeah, I recorded a great interview with her, and we went off topic and started talking about Australian cinema and cults in Australia and serial killers. And after I published the interview in the magazine, the audio vanished, disappeared from my computer. I don't know where it is, so no one will ever get to hear the delicious story that came from that. But yeah, anyway, Stack Magazine are the main people that hook me up with the celebrities, and all the others like your Jeff Burrs and your I've done Harlan Williams and a few of sort of the lesser names. Right. They come to me. I track them down. I'm desperate to get Randy Quaid.
Ooh, good luck.
We would love to have Randy Quaid. That'd be fantastic.
I love it. Even now, I love the manic lunacy that he's adopting this character. He reads these Trump tweets in character, and it's glorious. I love it.
I completely agree.
You don't know if he's satirical or if he's just a madman. It's just, yeah.
Man, yeah. You almost think it's a ladder because you look at it and go, that really was him in Caddyshack too.
So why was Michael Mann so difficult?
Ego. I think he felt like he was forced into the interview because it was to discuss the anniversary of Last of the Mohicans. And I think in his mind, that film is just too long past to talk about. But an interesting thing, which I was very careful about putting online, so I kind of did make a little cheeky edit just to make him not sound as bad. I addressed the point that he was part of a movement of indigenous films at the time, telling American stories. And he flat out just said to me, that's not true. We were the only one. I'm like, well, okay, well, I've got proof that you're not. But he didn't want to hear about it. And then so I just moved on. But then a few minutes later, you could tell it bothered him because he came back at me and he said, well, okay, why don't you tell me what some of these so-called other movies of this movement were? I'm like, well, Dances with Wolves, how about we start there? And he goes, you've got a point. Moving on. Yeah, so I don't take well to prickly pears, but you will appreciate the most difficult one I've ever had, which was Jim Wynorski.
Oh, have you listened to ours yet?
Yes, Chad, you copped the exact same thing I did right at the start when he goes, I've been asked that before. Moving on,
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what, mate? Most of the people listening don't know who the fuck you are, so why don't you tell them?
Yeah.
So, funny story. Chad, do you want to tell him how I tried to get him a year or two ago, several times. I wanted to talk to him, because not necessarily we're huge fans, but he's so prolific, right? Yeah. I mean, and he coined the phrase, boobs are the cheapest, blah, 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 special effects. I mean, he must have tremendous stories somewhere underneath the asshole. He has to have. And he defriended me on Facebook. Then Chad comes up about a month ago and says, by the way, I got Jim Wynorski. We don't even talk, because it's kind of a competition between the three of us about trying to get people. And it's really good. I think I actually said this about a few weeks ago. I was like, it's good competition between us. Should be a little bit of competition. Yeah. And I was like, great, awesome. And Chad was like, yeah, he was really nice on the phone. Right, Chad? Mm-hmm. I said, really? Because he was not so nice to me.
And then Chad's the first one that copped his attitude.
Yeah.
You know what? That was a fantastic interview because you ended up you buttered him up and he really gave you a lot.
Oh, really?
Well, thank you, because I haven't listened to it. I just kind of threw it up there. We were all three, and a funny story, my tower computer, the CPU, died last weekend, and I hadn't moved it to the external hard drive, and it was on there. And magically, the tower started working the next morning, but I texted them and go, I don't know what we're going to do. The interview's there. I didn't upload it to the cloud. It's not on the external hard drive. I hadn't did that yet. And Chad goes, well, if we're going to lose one, that was it. We're going to lose one.
And, along with those stories, I use Zoom every day. Never had a problem. And Jim Wynorski, the reason I contacted him is because one of those films that was an inspiration for me, what made me love films, was Return to Swamp Thing. I watched it almost daily when I was a kid. The creature effects, Swamp Thing. I still have a love of Swamp Thing to this day. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to contact him. And he wrote me back almost immediately. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited. And then he starts to tell the Swamp Thing story. And Zoom crashes on me. And I can't hear anything. These guys he's talking to them too, and I'm watching them shake his hand, them shaking their heads. And I see Joe laugh. I'm like, what am I missing? What am I missing?
I really need to go back and listen to it then, because I thought he was a little bit of that's a really good way to put it. He's a little bit of a prickly pear.
I really wish.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I really wish that we could have got him and Peter David on the same thing. So Peter David could have told the story about how they should just read Peter David's adaptation of Return of Swamp Thing and just let him respond to that. I would have loved for that to happen. It didn't work.
Well, I advertise you guys on our episodes now of our podcast, and I took a nice audio grab of him telling that story about how Chopping Mall got its name.
Yep.
That was a great story.
It is. He was fine after a while. So what I tell people, because I do a lot of the moderating for cons, I do Scarefest, I do our Lexington Comic Con here. I've enjoyed it. I've been really lucky. There's no money in it, but I've enjoyed it and I've been really lucky. And people, the question I get a lot is the first one's like, what are stars or what are they like? And I always say stars, any of these people are like anybody else. 90% are great, 10% are assholes.
Yeah.
What do you think, Glenn?
Yes.
That's it. They're like people. They are people. 90% are great, 10% are assholes. The biggest asshole I ever. Go ahead.
No, I just said I don't get starstruck.
I did the first couple. I'll tell you, the first time I met Bruce Campbell, I was a little starstruck. It was hard not to be, but after I listened to him for a few minutes, I was like, oh no, he's just really pompous. Great entertainer, great on stage, wonderful. I don't know that I want to hang out with him too much after it kind of wears off. Do you know what I mean?
I think the only time I've ever been starstruck talking to the celebrities and the people we've talked to is it was one of the first experiences of meeting a celebrity and meeting one of my icons, William Forsythe. I literally got starstruck with William Forsythe. I couldn't. Joe's wife was with me at the time, Giggity, and we met. And
well, she's going to sleep around. At least she could, keep it friendly.
He was at a table by himself, and I had a short conversation with him, and I could not come up with the words to talk to him, and I was like, I walked away, and because he even did the laugh when he did the scary clown for Masters of Horror, he did that laugh for me, and I giggled like a 3-year-old. I giggled, and then I walked away, and I looked at his wife, and said, I didn't ask about flat top.
What's your favorite William Forsythe film?
My favorite William Forsythe film. It's actually not a film. It's him as Flat Top is one of those iconic roles for me. But his portrayal as Al Capone in The Untouchables, in the syndicated television show, was it's one of those memorable moments for me. It's one of the few shows, like me and my dad didn't have a lot in common in terms of our entertainment likes. He liked the Green Berets and really schlocky westerns, and I just couldn't get into them. But every Saturday afternoon around 1 o'clock, we turn on the TV and we watch The Untouchables. So, yeah, that's just that's one of the fondest memories I have.
For me, it's all about Dead Bang for me.
Oh, Dead Bang is good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've got another 80s action film that I love him in that I haven't seen it in a long time that I love. It's directed by Craig R. Baxley. It's called Stone Cold. It's got him and Lance Henriksen in it as the bad guys.
Craig Baxley.
Craig R. Baxley. I'd love to have him on the show. I'd like to talk to him about Storm. He actually directed one of my favorite Stephen King
Storm of the Century.
Storm of the Century. Yeah, it's one of those where I actually think Stephen King, I'm a huge Stephen King fan. He's my favorite living author. And that was one of the few that I thought he stuck to the landing, right? So one criticism you can throw at King is that the endings sometimes are never what you want. Of course, it's not about the ending, but I think Storm of the Century has the perfect ending.
That final scene is chilling.
Yeah, with the kid and the teeth. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
What is the William Forsythe movie that he did? Oh, man. I'm blanking. It was with the chick who was the replacement on Sliders.
I don't know. It's obscure.
I know. Oh my God, I'm blanking. Glenn put me on the spot.
Well, Glenn, while he's thinking about that, who's been and these are very cliche questions, but I get them a lot, so now I want to shove them at you. Who's been some of your favorites?
Interviews?
Yeah.
Well, Rob Zombie was amazing. Like if I was going to get close to being starstruck, it was the first 5 seconds of that interview, because that dawned upon me that I'm talking to this rock star and an amazing, well, I won't say amazing filmmaker, but good filmmaker.
No, distinct voice, Glenn. I always defend him. I say, you know what? I don't like.
It's an experience. You're going to get an experience.
Of his movies. Some of them I really like, but I will tell you, when I see a Rob Zombie movie, that was not made by a committee. That had a distinct voice, and God bless him.
You get a particular type of trash.
Yes.
So, but I do like it. Like, I mean, Devil's Rejects is one of the great American films as far as I'm concerned. But he's made a lot of poxy stuff too. But anyway, I'm a big fan of his music, and as a rock star, I couldn't believe that I was talking to him. But the second he opened his mouth, he was so down to earth and, just easy to talk to, and he was forthgiving and just wanted to discuss stuff. And it was very easy to have a conversation with him. for sure. Trying to think who else. Recently did one with Jason Lee Howden, and he's the director of Guns Akimbo, the new Daniel Radcliffe film.
I am dying to see that movie.
Yeah, he was great. Like, obviously being from New Zealand, we're very much on the same kind of personality level. He's got the same sense of humor I do.
Yeah. And
yeah, we hit it off. It was a really good interview. Actually, you probably never heard of this guy. His name's Matthew Holmes. I talk about him a lot on Fake Shemp. He directs Aussie films. Did a big Western called The Legend of Ben Hall, which was produced by Greg McLean, who did Wolf Creek. And
I know Greg McLean, yeah.
Yes.
And this guy makes really unique, Aussie films about colonial stories, bushranger stories, and I've known him for quite a while, and I managed to get him in on the desk. One of our episodes a couple of months ago, it's just me and him at the desk, riffing, talking about everything, and that was one of my favorites, just because of the dynamic we had.
Yeah, I have to go back and check that out.
By the way,
video too.
Beyond Desire.
Never heard of it.
1995's William Forsythe and Kari Wooer. I'm now.
Yeah. Now I know.
Yeah. There's a lot of cheesy, bloody violence and a very awkward sex scene between those two.
So, what are some of the movies now? Because I feel, and this is probably true for America, because we just get bombarded with American films, and I don't know that a lot of Americans pay attention to the cinema outside of America, unless it just blows up and then gets caught up, like, I don't know, something like Parasite, right? And then they pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And especially now, you had a quote the other day that I don't necessarily disagree with. I do follow you on social media, and I am paying attention, brother, about America losing its way, and I don't know that I disagree with that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I adore America. Like, it's my. I mean, I lived in Canada, but I spent a lot of time in America, and I just love it. I adore it. But when I said that, it was just more that America at the moment has an issue seeing themselves from the outside.
Agreed. Right? I completely agreed.
And I don't want to sound offensive, but there's an ignorance to the greater world, right? Whereas we consume everything. Like, we get all of the news from Korea. We get all the news from, what's happening in Europe. We get all the American news, like, in our headlines. And if you go to an American newspaper, it's all American stories and news articles. And right down the bottom in the byline, it might be one international story. I just find that there's a disconnect these days.
I think it's been there for a long time. I appreciate you saying these days, but I think, we're talking about a country that didn't want to go into World War II, because of, if you got into a lot of American history, and this is a very deep conversation probably for this kind of show, because we were isolationists. And I think there's a lot of puritanical things that are still here 300-400 years later, and a lot of isolationists. You got to remember, everybody's like, fuck England and roll off. But a lot of the groups that came here was because England didn't really want them either.
Yeah. I was about to say that Greg Proops has a great stand-up comedy thing that's now several years old, where he says, they celebrate Thanksgiving in England as well. It's called Screw Off Puritans. Nobody wanted these people. They were trying to have the Renaissance, and you had people going, no, we're going to wear buckles on our hats. And not on our shoes, just on our hats. And that's what we're going to do. And you're going to do it. And they were like, no. Go. And he makes the jokes. And what did they send them with? Guns and Bibles. Best of luck to you. And seems like we get that.
I said all that to actually, that's a long-winded diversion into what are some films right now that, because of streaming, for good or for bad, the good thing about streaming is that everyone has access. The playing field is level. I often say this also too. There's never been a time in history where you have access to more media. It's never been harder to make a dime in media, to make some money in media, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
40 years ago, 50 years ago, you could raise a few $100,000, sell this movie. 30 years ago, and you could put it on video. And that's not even a possibility anymore. It's never been harder to make a living in media than it is right now, even with the abundance of media. So what are some movies that Americans don't know about, or some filmmakers? This is a very tough question. I'm sorry. There's some filmmakers that they don't know about that they should be paying attention to, or they should be watching, that they can get access to.
That's essentially why I do my segment on Scarefest TV every week, isn't it? Like, to just, because I know Australian films and love them so much, I try to sort of throw some good ones at you. That's a really hard question off the top of my head. I mean,
it's okay. We can come back to it.
It'll still be hard. Because I know a lot of like good films. I don't necessarily know the filmmakers because they haven't sort of risen up just yet. Like the guy who directed Cargo. Have you seen that one with Martin Freeman?
Mm-mm.
It's a Australian zombie film with Martin Freeman from The Hobbit.
Absolutely.
Yo, of course we know Martin Freeman.
Yeah, so he did an Aussie film. It's so beautiful, and it's set in the outback, and there's a zombie outbreak or apocalypse, and he and his wife are trying to get the child to safety. But
I've read about it. Yes.
So then his mission is he's got 48 hours to find some kind of safe haven for his infant before he turns into a ravenous zombie. It's beautiful. It's a great film. That is available on one of your streaming platforms over there.
Good. Oh, and that's another pain in the ass is because the streaming platforms change from each country of what you got access to.
But do you know the website justwatch.com?
No.
Oh,
I can check it out.
So justwatch.com means you can type in, any movie and it'll tell you exactly what platform it's on.
and Cargo is streaming on Netflix right now.
There you go.
So I shall be watching that.
I still haven't
It's
got. He's in Ghost Stories, right? I still haven't got to watch
Yeah.
that. That's on Netflix. It's
Wasn't a huge fan of that.
I just watched something today. I was telling Chad about it, not to get off topic. It's a movie that I think had unfortunate timing that I enjoyed the absolute hell out of. And did you see The Hunt?
Oh, yeah, the one with what's her name from Glee? The
There you
Globe.
go.
Glow. Yeah. I watched it today, and because of the kid the last few years, my consumption has been tapered off, and it's a little harder for me to get to see new things as I used to all the time. And I just got to watch it today, and I was like, oh, man. Even if it hadn't been for the bad politics in the fall and they got pushed back, and then it got pushed back to when COVID was sweeping across the nation, I don't know that it'd been popular, but that's a movie that I just really liked.
Yeah, it's fun.
It was a lot of fun, poking fun at both sides.
In a way, it doesn't really take a political side. It kind of goes right down the middle and says you're both screwed up,
You're both so fucking stupid. I know, both sides. And even the liberals probably get it worse than anyone in that movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to get off on an aside there.
Well, actually, one name I want to throw out there, which I talk about all the time on Scarefest TV, but can't talk about enough. Have you heard of a guy called Everett D-Rush?
Just from your segments.
So he's an expat American that came to Australia in the 70s and wrote some of the most prolific films down here. Really, he did Frog Dreaming, which I know you know that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's one streaming on Amazon Prime right now.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, did you say Road Games?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Road Games as a kid. I don't know how I saw Road Games as a kid, but I knew Stacy Keach and Jamie Lee Curtis, so I saw it as a child.
He did Long Weekend, which is like Tarantino's favorite film. Razorback, Patrick. Look this guy up. He passed away a few years ago, and
so much for getting him on the show.
The legacy he's left is just the best. No, but I was his final interview, so you can go to Fake Shemp and look him up.
So you killed him.
Well, I did attend his funeral. Maybe there's a bit of guilt.
There's a bit of guilt. That's okay. There's a friend of mine who runs a con, and I won't say which one. It's not Scarefest, so it kind of narrows it down if you know me a little bit. And that he has killed 2 actors in the last 2 years. He got their signatures to come to his convention right before they died.
Well, they've signed the contract.
They signed the contract. Yeah. One in particular signed it that morning and died of a heart attack later after the afternoon. Anyway, yeah, that's a hell of a segue on that.
Here, let me segue better. So about an hour ago, I was wearing shorts with no crotch in them.
Yeah, you weren't doing that around the children, were you?
My kids are spending the night with their grandparents.
Oh, really? Well,
I want to get all gussied up for Glenn.
Yeah. So, what are some of your favorite movies now? What are some things that you keep going back to? Because I find that as I get older, I revisit things, and I'm sure it's perspective and age and wisdom and 5,000 other things and experiences, but I go back and watch things that I loved that I don't love quite as much, and then I go back and visit things that I didn't care for, and now I totally get them.
Like your hatred of E.T.?
What'd you say?
I said like your hatred of E.T. when you were a child.
I didn't care for E.T. I wasn't until I was in my 30s and enjoyed it. And now I really enjoy it. I'm actually trying to figure out when I should show it to my son.
I think it's that saturation of content that there's just too much of it that we go back to what we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I don't know. Reanimator, that's always one I go back to.
Did you ever get to meet Stuart Gordon or interview him?
No. Oh, wish.
I didn't either.
He was good friends with Albert Pune, and they used to have dinner together. And I'd been over to Vegas and stayed with Albert, and if he had teed that up, that would have made my life. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, I never got to meet him either. He was just an hour away a couple of years ago. I could have, and it was at a con who doesn't hire me, so I tend not to go to those as much because I don't want to pay for it. And I should have just went. I should have just dropped the money and went and met him just so I could have said thank you, even though he's heard it 5,000 times, and just met him.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a tip for you. It's really hard to secure Brian Usner. He says yes to everything and then never delivers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he's approachable. He says, "Here's my email. Get in touch, and we'll organize something." And then that's the last you'll hear of it.
Well, I was about to say
I'm dealing with that with an actress right now.
We've ran into that, and the other thing that we've run into, and I wonder if you ever encountered this, because I'm a big fan, and I'll just say the property, I guess. I'm a big fan of the Muppets, and I grew up on the Muppets. My father likes the Muppets. We have a family tradition of watching Muppets Christmas Carol every Thanksgiving because of my father.
And we watch Ernest Scared Stupid every Easter.
No, it's a kick in my father's mind. It's a kickoff to the Christmas season. You finish Thanksgiving dinner,
and you watch
a Christmas movie. And it used to be the Alistair Sims, and then my dad fell in love with Michael Caine. That being said, we've reached out.
Michael Caine has got a restraining order now.
James has had to watch Jaws 4 so many times.
No, we've reached out to a lot of the Muppet performers, the older ones that are retired and things like that. And we've gotten responses. I've gotten responses where they're like, nobody cares about our stories. Nobody wants to hear about being a Muppet performer in the 70s and working with you. And I'm like, I know Frank Oz now has his own podcast where he brings them back. But so many of them have just said, nobody's going to care about our stories to us. I've had at least 7 I can name off the top of my head where they have said nobody cares about the story. And I'm like, that's why we need them, because people do care. And some of these people are getting older.
The proof is in the pudding. We've had 2 really good documentaries about Muppet performers. Like, we need more.
Yeah, and that's it. And I was like, even if you just, because one of them in particular that I talked to, she did primarily the background minor female characters on the Muppet Show. And I'm like, that's the stories I want. I'm probably not going to get Frank Oz. I would love to have Frank Oz, but I was like, I want to know, what does it mean to be the journeyman Muppet performer? But anyway,
there's never a better time for it. Everything's retro at the moment. Why wouldn't they? Like, Dark Crystal's back. Like, this is the time to do it.
Well, we're getting a new Muppet Show. Allegedly, Disney Plus is going to throw us. We'll see. But I just wondered if you ever encountered that where somebody goes, "Well, I don't think anybody's going to be interested in hearing from."
No, I mean, I get rejections. Like, just don't want to do it, but never really any elaborate sort of detail as to why.
Or you'll get what we now know is called the Hollywood no, silence.
Oh yeah.
Here's one that I really appreciate. Mick Garris said no and gave me reasons why no, as far as I don't have time to do this shit. I'm running my own podcast. What'd you say?
We're kind of friends, Mick Garris and I, because we chat a fair bit, and he not desperately, he wants to come on our show, but he said he would only do it via FaceTime. And back the last time we were going to tee something up, I wasn't doing FaceTime. I'm like, no, I need to do it in a certain way. We pre-record. I want to do a pre-recorded thing. He wanted to do it live. So it didn't come together, but he did want to do it. And I need to reach out to him now that Zoom is so easy to access. I really need to get back in touch.
Yeah, I would love to have him on the show. I've often thought, what can I ask him that he hasn't already talked about? Which leads me to my next question with some of these folks who are willing to do it. You try in my business, in our business, especially for conventions, you never ask Mark Hamill about Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Ask him about something else.
The Guyver.
Yeah.
Flipstream.
Slipstream.
Slipstream. What a great.
I watched him one
talk
time.
about.
I watched him talk about the Joker once. Just goes off, and obviously has such a love for doing the voice of the Joker. But you'd never ask Mark Hamill about Star Wars. So, my favorite interview that I've ever done, not in the podcast, but on a panel, was George Romero, and that was one of the few times I was starstruck. And I promised him I wouldn't ask about zombies. I was like, the audience will ask about that. I want to ask about some other things. So, how do you approach it, trying to be interesting, but not ask cliche questions? I know what I try to do, but I'm curious about your process.
Well, I tend not to care what they think. I'll ask what I want. And usually I will approach them with a theme, like it might be an anniversary, or it might be, I only want to talk about this, but if it's okay, I might ask a few other questions, and you can just decline to answer if you want to. But when they're on the spot, they're not going to decline because they know they're on the spot, and it'll make them look bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to
don't give a shit.
I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but I figure if I ask a question politely and they're committed to the interview, they're not going to want to look like a dick. So they'll probably answer.
Yeah. Unless they're Michael Mann.
At the time, he was under the impression it was only going to be print.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can get that. There's some people that I would love to reach out to that I really don't know what I could talk to them about. I hit it off. Speaking of Reanimator, Jeffrey Combs, I ran his panel last year, 2 years ago in Scarefest, and we actually talked afterwards, and we talked that night a little bit, and I really wanted him to do the show, and he's like, nah, there's just nothing for me to talk about. And I didn't really get the opportunity to say, listen, we're not going to talk about Reanimator. Let's talk about
the Frighteners.
Let's talk about the Frighteners. Let's talk about, if you want to talk about Star Trek.
Let's do an hour and a half conversation about you playing Shran in Star Trek Enterprise. That's all I want.
We can talk about your experiences just in acting and making a living. I don't give a shit what you want to talk about.
Actually, I would love to hear Jeffrey Combs talk about working with Stuart Gordon on that one-man Poe show they did.
Yeah, I would have liked to talk about that too. But I understand that they've told so many stories about one project that's 40, sometimes 50 years ago that it's hard to remember certain things.
Yeah. If I was to get Jeffrey Combs, I'd only want to talk about Fortress, the Christopher Lambert film.
Yeah,
it's on my shelf over here. I've got Fortress and Fortress 2.
Fortress.
Well, that was made down here, and like I'd be able to tie in lots of questions about working in Australia with Australian crew, and
Right. Was Space Truckers made down there as well?
No, but what a great film that is.
Oh, isn't it?
Yeah.
James's favorite movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's a one that does not have a fantastic ending, but that's a lot of fun.
But you and your fucking endings, mate. Like, seriously. Like, you said it yourself. It's a lot of fun.
I know.
And
Wes ripped me on the show a while back about that fucking third act, and I was like, "Well, seriously, some of them they just blow it. They just blow it." Like that 3-part Dracula on Netflix. I was getting into it, and the second part I was like, "Well, it's just like if you follow whatever that guy's name is who writes Sherlock and then started out or was famous for doing Doctor Who before that, who did Dracula." I was like,
R.L. Stein.
No, fuck you.
I'm in it all.
Anyway, but then it's like, oh, the last 20 minutes of that is awful.
Hey, Chad, what is this?
Dracula for a while.
What'd you say?
Wes was obsessed with that show because, like, for 3 or 4 weeks straight, that's all he wanted to talk about. And he had me call into the show, and I'm ready to talk about movies and websites. And he's like, "So, what did you think of Dracula?" I'm like, oh.
Wes will never watch this, but you can go ahead and tell him this is a true story, and I don't give a shit if he gets mad for me telling it. He had to last year or 2 years ago. He had to do a panel. They gave him the B movie actress panel, and I usually do a lot of the panels. Didn't hurt my feelings. Didn't bother me one little bit. And he said he was walking to the panel, and I was walking by him. He goes, "So, do you actually do research for this shit? Do you actually have questions?" And I said, and I'm almost positive I said, and I'm sorry to our audience that I have to drop the F-bomb. Yes, motherfucker, I have a ton of questions ready to go. It may look like I don't have a lot of questions. I probably will never get to all my questions, but I have them.
Right, it's usually questions like, do you like ham?
Do you like? Billy Piper. I did one for Billy Piper, and someone asked her favorite dessert, and she had never been happier. She goes, "Oh, thank you. I'm sick of Doctor Who questions." She was more than happy to talk about food. What'd you say?
I've got a question for you.
What?
Why did you apologize for that F-bomb, but none of the ones that preceded it?
Exactly.
Probably because I'm an asshole. I don't know. I wasn't even thinking about it. Because if I had to stick, we just wouldn't do the show if I had to stick.
Maybe because it was a personal one.
Maybe it was a personal story. He may not even remember saying it. He probably doesn't, but I remember it.
Yeah.
As he was going to do the panel, how do you actually do this? Don't you host a show every week where you have to interview somebody? Oh, well, anyway, I thought it was funny. Yeah. So who are some of the dream guests that you'd like to have? I know there's some of ours, but who would you like? I mean, just off the top of your head.
Mate, it's all about Randy Quaid.
Is it just Randy Quaid?
He's the one we're trying to get the most. Like, he's the one that we desperately want. I want to get one back. I want Harlan Williams, because we had him do a bit for us to celebrate Rocket Man, the Disney film.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Actually, I know him now from Puppy Dog Pals because of my son. Well,
I think he's one of the greats, and I think Rocket Man's one of the great funny films of all time.
Really?
Really undervalued.
Completely I need to go back and watch it.
Yeah, it's genius. It's G-rated, so it's clean, and every joke just lands. And so we had him almost do like a 5-minute commentary for us, which you can find on our YouTube channel, and tells us backstories, tries to do an Australian accent. But I want him back to have a discussion. But I feel like when it comes to us, he feels like he's already done something for us, and that's enough. Right. So I don't think I'll get him back. I'd love to have him back. Who else? Have you heard of the film Bad Boy Bubby?
No.
That's an Australian film. It's very notorious. It's pretty extreme. There's an actor in that called Nicholas Hope, who you'd recognise in other things, but I'd love to get him on the show, and its director, Rolf de Heer. But if you haven't heard of that one, it's not one worth talking about.
Yeah.
It's Bad Boy Bubby. Just look it up. It's extreme.
Is it kind of like Old Boy?
No, it's about a man child that's been raised by his abusive mother in one room for his entire life. And when he kills her accidentally, he has to venture out into the real world on his own, but he doesn't know what the real world is. He thinks it's poisonous, and he's got no moral code. He's got no limits on what he does. It's very...
I am intrigued by this movie.
Yeah, if you can make it past the first 20 minutes, then you're in for a treat. Because the first 20 minutes is where most people walk out or turn it off.
Huh.
Well, a lot of incest, a lot of animal torture.
Is it real animal torture?
Here's a good story for you. The director's a really prolific filmmaker down here. He doesn't do all extreme films. He does a lot of indigenous films and historical films. But for that one film, there's a scene where Bubby, the character Bubby, has to wrap a cat in cellophane because he thinks it's like a toy. He doesn't understand the concept of breathing, so he suffocates the cat. But for the film, they asked the RSPCA, can we have one of your cats for a morning to shoot this scene, and we'll give it back? And they were fine with that. They had animal, welfare on the set, shot their scenes. It was all good. And then the agreement was a week later, when they have to shoot scenes with a dead cat, they would provide a euthanized cat that they could use. Turns out the euthanized cat that they gave them was the one they'd used the week before. So I guess continuity was good.
Oh, no.
Ugh. I just didn't want a cannibal Holocaust situation.
No, none of that.
Because it's one of those movies that's probably important, but I won't watch. I don't need that shit in my head. I won't ever watch it again.
Cannibal Holocaust, the DVD offers the safe version without the torture.
I know. And I met the director. Is it Rogerio? I can't say it correctly.
That's how I say it.
Yeah. It's tough. I met him. He is one.
But you have the cool accent, so.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, our accent's cool down. No, nowhere.
No, it's not.
Nowhere in the world. I met him at a weekend. Fangoria used to do Weekend of Horrors convention. Actually, I saw Tony Timpone, who's the old editor. They're going to be doing those again with Creation, only they don't have the Fango name on them anymore. It's just going to be Weekend of Horrors with Creation. And I met him there, and he was one of the nicest, sweetest individuals I've ever came across, and he looks like someone's grandpa. But it's one of those movies that is very important that I can't recommend to people.
Yeah.
No, that movie sounds interesting because as you were talking about the plot and the child being locked away, it reminded me of a novel which has a different ending, I'm sure. But The True Tale of the Monster Billy Dean, which is a novel about a child that it's after World War II, and his parents lock him away and then he's raised thinking that he's going to somehow save the world, but he's never allowed out of his room. And then his parents, spoiler, things happen, and he has to go out into the world.
Well, that sounds like Blast from the Past with Brendan Fraser.
Oh, Glenn, you took my damn joke, you jerk.
Well, the problem is...
I was a beat away from doing it.
The title is separate from Blast from the Past. There's a reason that he thinks he's a monster when he goes out in the world, because he realizes he's not going to be the Messiah. So it's a little darker of a novel. But anyway, yeah, doesn't sound as dark as that movie ends up, though, because there's no...
Here's a question for you. Best line from Blast from the Past. Could you get away with that today, where he walks out onto the street and says, "Oh, my lucky stars, a Negro"?
No.
I don't know, because the question is, can you make Blazing Saddles today? People say no. But Borat, I don't know that we can make Borat now. And Borat is, 10, 15 years old? It's not even that old.
There was a great commentary about...
or Tropic Thunder. Tropic Thunder is another one. I don't know that we could have Tropic Thunder now. And that's a big budget Hollywood film.
I follow a couple people on Twitter, and speaking of people I'd love to interview, John Cleese is one of the people I follow, and he recently was going back and forth with someone, not defending J.K. Rowling. He actually said, "Will somebody explain to me what J.K. Rowling said that was completely wrong and how she could make it right?" And somebody posted something back, and he said, "So are you saying that," his comment was something like, "Are you saying it's okay to make Jewish jokes if you're a Jewish comedian?" And it's cut off to everybody else. And then somebody came back and went, "That's absolutely what we're saying." And he was like, "That seems problematic too." And I don't know the answer to that, but I find it really interesting to see John Cleese going back and forth. And I think
John Cleese has a history of raising his voice when these things come up.
He does.
And he's in the news at the moment because they removed that episode of Fawlty Towers.
And what did they just do?
Well, they reinstated it.
Yeah. Because of John Cleese.
Because of John Cleese, that's right.
Yeah.
He's always very articulate. And I mean, that's what Monty Python were. They were pushing that envelope, but they always had the context and the answer for why they do it.
Yep.
I think what's really interesting was somebody posted about, Gone with the Wind, it was taken off a streaming service here in America.
Yeah.
But the same week, and this is true, I think it's Netflix, you can watch, or Amazon Prime, one or the other. The same week, they posted the comedy, I think from 1986, Joe, you'll have to correct me, Soul Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd probably be 85, 86, yeah.
And they were like, so... And I think that's one of the big challenges I have as I'm a quote-unquote educational historian. I teach the history of education, but I do wonder sometimes, like, Disney in America has banned We'll Never See Song of the South officially released and things like that. And I see that as, yes, that's a problematic film. But the historian in me goes, James Baskett, who played
Uncle Remus.
Uncle Remus. Thank you, Uncle Remus. It was a big deal that they actually cast, quite frankly, an African-American man there. He couldn't even attend the premiere, but they still managed it. So it's... Yeah. It's a complicated thing. So I just wonder, do you see that as somebody that's not in America right now? What is your thoughts on?
Well, we've got to be careful talking about it here too, because whatever culture you guys sort of manifest over there does affect us, because we then get certain elements of our society that try to piggyback off it.
Mm-hmm.
We are so sorry.
But look, the way I look at it, and I've spoken about this on my show and I've gotten criticism for it. I mean, these things are timepieces, they're timestamps. They are of their era. they represent attitudes of the time. So we should leave them in place and just learn from them. Like, it shows us how far we've come. It doesn't show anything else as far as I'm concerned. Like, people are not going to watch Gone with the Wind and think anything less of it, because the only kind of people that would be watching it are people that are interested in good films. So they've got the capacity to process the attitudes of the time, you know? Just, you don't erase history, you just move on from it.
I agree. The only thing I would add on to that I'm okay with is a disclaimer at the front, or a disclaimer at the end, or a talk. Whoopi Goldberg talked about this.
Yeah, Whoopi Goldberg.
This is what this is at this time. Please keep this in mind before you watch it.
And if that's what they have to do to keep the film there, then I understand that. But if I mean, what kind of uneducated, dumbass generation are we that we need that we can't contextualize on our own?
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
And they're vocal.
If you're, that's the problem, the vocal minority. But if you're going to cancel Gone with the Wind, you may as well cancel the first ever African-American Oscar. Like, that's significant.
Yep.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's, what, 80-something years old? Like, get fucked.
It was 1939, which is considered the Hollywood's greatest year, 1939.
Yeah, it pushed envelopes. It was the first curse word in cinema.
Yep. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a shit. What? Did I get that wrong?
Joe's parents were worried about him picking up language. So they had one dubbed specially for him.
So I want to point out how come. Go ahead, Glenn.
Here's something to consider. So we're canceling films like Gone with the Wind, things that just have so much relevance in cinematic history. But films like 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy, which perpetuates a certain stereotype, that's not a problem. Just because it's Eddie Murphy, we get it. So I just think the slope is too slippery to just pick and choose which ones we cancel. Just leave them all in place. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. Move on and make progressive films.
Yeah, make your own damn movie.
Yeah.
With your own damn voice about your own damn experience.
Don't you love it when they cancelled James Gunn, but didn't go further back to see his Stephen Hawkins impersonation in Toxic Avenger 4?
Chad here is the Toxic Avenger fan.
I'm a Lloyd Kaufman fan, plain and simple.
Your email what?
My old email address was Toximite. I'm big into it.
Have you ever met Lloyd?
No, but he did. He's done. I missed an opportunity. He came down here for Monster Fest, which is our big horror thing in Melbourne. And the guys that I run my website with were the ones that hosted him and drove him everywhere and shot videos with him. And I was not available on the day to do that. But he has recorded a few things for Fake Shemp. And I used to run a trauma series of screenings here in Melbourne, and for 6 months, we just screened double features of trauma films for free to anyone that wants to come along.
I was going to say, about 4 hours before the wedding, where I married my beautiful wife, I watched Sergeant Kabuki Man in YPD.
In my apartment.
In his apartment.
Yeah, that's a true story. Yeah, we'd been drinking the night before. But, he's actually a very nice guy. And he's one of those people, him and Mick Garris, who signed for free. I mean, I try not. I'm with you. Once you get to a certain thing, I don't want to ever pay anybody for an autograph. There are certain people I probably would pay now, but they're very few and far between.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we need to start wrapping it up.
I do want to point out how our conversations go full circle. So Glenn stole my Blast from the Past joke. The guy who directed and wrote Blast from the Past actually wrote my favorite Harlan Williams film, Down Periscope. Full circle.
Down Periscope with Kelsey Grammer. I love that movie.
Is Lauren Holly in that?
Yep.
Good
job, sir. I am impressed. So, I had some other questions that I wanted to ask you, but we're probably running a little long. I do want to talk to you. Well, what other things? You got one book. You're writing another book. Can you talk about that?
Well, the other book is called I Love That Movie, It Sucks, which is a book of reviews of really, really terrible films that I do love, and I write positive reviews for them. So Caddyshack 2 will be the cover art, and Heretic will be in there, and I just celebrate trashy cinema.
The Exorcist 2. Now, Grease 2, I'll tell you why I love Grease 2.
Full circle.
Okay.
My mom had a
Hold on. Let me mute my microphone real quick.
My mom had a crush on the lead actor, so she watched it all the time when I was a kid. So I can actually sing almost every song from Grease 2 still, like a cool rider. I can just do
that
it.
stupid dance that she does.
Yep. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't put Grease 2 in, but I probably know the songs to Grease 2 more than I do Grease.
Hey, did you know that Disney's High School Musical was originally Grease 3?
I did not know that.
Oh.
That's the origins for that film were Grease 3.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I still haven't seen Grease 3 or High School Musical.
I now have, because I have children, and my daughter is really into musicals, and she performs locally in theater musicals. And Joe, let me tell you, don't rush. There's no rush. You can catch that whenever you want. You can. I mean, don't get me wrong. Say what you will. Zac Efron, dreamy, whatever. But
you should watch Teen Beach Movie instead.
Funny story. My wife has watched that with them, and I drew the line. There was like, no, it turns out unless Frankie and Annette are coming back, I'm good.
But you do have Barry Bostwick, and that's okay.
Who is another guy who's a total mensch, who is a total wonderful, nice person.
One of the best interviews I got to do, and he thanked me afterwards because he was selling underwear, signed underwear. And at the end of the interview, I said, listen, I work for a university. He said he had 2 kids in college at the time. I said, buy this man's underwear. College is expensive. And later on, I saw him on the floor, and he was like, thank you for saying that. You're the only interview I've ever had where they were like, no, really, buy his stuff. College is expensive. He was a great guy.
Before we go, 2 things. One, Julian Sands was another person who was amazing and did a soliloquy for us in the middle of the panel, right? And it was beautiful. But number 2, why Hell on Earth? Why Hellraiser 3?
Well, because both of those are Anthony Hitchcock's films.
Oh, yeah.
And they're both the same poster. If you look at the template.
They really are.
I never thought about it till,
I love Anthony Hitchcock. He would be one I'd love to get on the show. I should reach out to him.
Oh, yeah. Why haven't you done that before?
He's on Facebook. I should.
Yes, you should. We should have him on. Hold on. Let's race to Andrew.
Quick. Now, do it.
No. You go ahead.
We've all proven Glenn's faster because of that blast from the past joke.
That's true.
You're really dirty. You're filthy on that one.
Speaking of blast from the past, thank you so much for coming on. So go to Fake Shemp. Click on his ads. We were talking about you before we started.
Okay, you said ads. You said ads.
Ads.
No, I thought you said click on his ass. I'm like,
ass. I could hit on his ass, click on
Go to the bottom and click on the ass.
Yeah. But we're really envious of one thing you have that we don't. Sponsors.
Well, my latest podcast doesn't have any at the moment because of this pandemic.
We have never had any at all. I don't even know that we know about the way to do it. I think we're just idiots. The good thing is that we don't need the money, but it would be nice every once in a while to pay for a few things.
Well, I mean, it takes, you got to cast your line about 100 times before you catch a fish. So it's all about just hitting everyone up at the same time and thinking outside the box. Like, I'm trying to approach breweries and getting like beer companies to sponsor and things like that. Localize it a little bit.
Oh, that's not a bad idea. There's a ton of microbreweries around here.
Over there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine? I'm not much of a drinker, but if we got sponsored by bourbon, I could learn.
Yeah, we could learn. I don't know why we haven't. I never even thought of it. I think we are here for the content, and what we really need is a strong producer, someone who just sits back here and just pets our heads and says, go do your thing, and I'll handle the actual business side of it.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got one more plug.
Yes, please.
I can't go into too much detail, but I do have a collaboration with Scarefest coming up very soon.
Why can't you go into detail?
Because they haven't announced it yet.
So we won't tell anybody. Nobody's listening. I know some people. I've been drunk with the owner.
It may be weekly.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Are you going to be at Scarefest this year?
Well, not this year. Hopefully next year.
Oh yeah, that's right. I actually am curious to see if it comes off this year myself. So we'll look. Hopefully next year. Hopefully there's a vaccine for all this or something's fixed by then.
Well, I think what I'm doing with them is to just, if it doesn't go ahead, it's at least bolstering the social media presence to sort of build the community up so that if heaven forbid it doesn't go ahead, at least they can rally together and have something in the meantime.
Yeah.
Just a platform for people.
I look forward to the day we actually get to meet you in person. I don't know if you drink or if you like to drink, but if you do, may I introduce you to some fine bourbons when you finally get here?
You may.
Absolutely. Well, Glenn, thank you so much. Please go over to Fake Shemp and visit us. We've had an absolute blast. This has been a pleasure. This has been Bonehead.
And check out Good Movie Monday.
Good Movie Monday. Also, check out Scarefest Television, okay? See you guys. All right.
Yeah, thank you.